This is a new episode of the Poking Stick podcast, and this is me editing that podcast. While I was recording with my good friend DizzyDisciple, I had no idea that I was running a 100+ fever, and it kind of shows now that I'm going back through the footage. So, bear with me, and if it seems like I am dazed and somewhere else, that's because I kind of was. But regardless, this is a good episode, and I hope you enjoy.
Hey, how's it going? You got a minute to talk?
Welcome to another episode of the Poking Stick podcast. I'm your host, Corey Woodard, aka the Poking Stick. Happy to be joined by the DizzyDisciple. A little bit of background about DizzyDisciple. Going years back, before the Poking Stick was even a legitimate thing, I had stumbled upon some of his content, and I can say with all sincerity that I would not be creating today if it weren't for some of the encouragement and advice that I got from DizzyDisciple. So I am thrilled to have him. So DizzyDisciple, do I call you DD, Dizzy? Anything I can call you? I'm
That is, I love it. That is very, very, um, man, humbling for sure. I love it. Honestly, Dizzy Disciple is it comes from a nickname. So I have friends who call me Dizzy. I've had this neurological thing that's been going on for so many years. I've always constantly complained about being dizzy. So my friends would go, "Oh, hey, Dizzy," because I'd always go, I'm dizzy," and they're like, "Hey, Dizzy." Almost like I'm hungry. Hi, hungry. I'm dad.
yeah.
So uh, you can call me Dizzy, whatever you want.
All right.
And
Cool.
yeah, excited to be here.
Cool. Well, thank you again. I'll hand it over to you real quick. If you just want to go ahead and break down what DizzyDisciple is, what your primary goal is, and how your content kind of goes out into the world and what you're trying to reach.
Man, that's a good question. So Dizzy Disciple, really, it's just me. I make films and I do documentaries on. Right now, it's centered around the Word of Faith movement. So I came from the Word of Faith movement, and it was such a dangerous and awful thing that I was a part of, and a lot of people don't know about it. And there's a lot of people who are stuck in it right now who have no idea that they're just ingesting these heretical, awful teachings from otherwise well-meaning, nice folks at their church or people that they see online or books that they read. And it's a shame that so many new believers have no idea of the dangers when it comes to the Word of Faith movement, the prosperity gospel, and things like that. And so um, I noticed online that the Christian content scene seemed pretty lackadaisical for a for the lack of a better term, probably lazy if I'm going to be a little more harsh. It kind of just felt like people were turning on their iPhone camera and just ranting and just allowed that to be their content. And there was like no rhyme or reason behind anything other than to just express opinions. And I was like, man, there's got to be something better when it comes to Christian content. Um, there's got to be something that exists in the realm of decent quality with a good message and a purpose behind it. And so Dizzy Disciple became the um, I guess like the documentarian of the Christian world when it comes to YouTube stuff. And so I was seeing people like Sunny V2 and James Janney and a few other creators, internet anarchists or something like that, or maybe even Patrick CC. I was seeing these guys and I was like, I don't see this in Christian content, and I think that's a shame. And so being an editor, I've been an editor since 2010, and that's kind of my gifting. And so I decided I'm gonna capitalize on my strengths and just kind of move forward with that. And so here we are. I took my past, my testimony, the things that I know in my life and the stories that I have and the information that I have. And then I just started to utilize my greatest strength, which is editing and creating these little documentaries. And so far it's been really good. It's gotten a lot of attention and I'm excited for it. And I hope that God uses it to break some chains when it comes to the prosperity gospel and the word of faith movement.
Yeah. And you have not shied away. One of your more recent videos is tackling, I guess, the personality of Kenneth Copeland, which, I mean, that's a huge thing to tackle. So right now, your YouTube is currently sitting about 1,100 subscribers. How long have you been, I guess, putting effort into YouTube? Like, when did you start really saying, okay, YouTube is going to be my thing, and I'm really going to lean into it and invest?
Right. So this channel is probably 2 months old, maybe 3 months old. And so it's a new endeavor on this front. But I've been on YouTube, as a fan since 2008. And so it's been a long time. And as I started editing in 2010, I started to work with other creators in this space and getting to know and understand what it takes to make a good video, what it takes to make a video that grabs attention, that gets views, that builds a community, that would otherwise build a business for somebody. Um, and so I think it's been for me, I mean, probably 12, 13, I mean, 2010. So almost 15 years of just YouTube.
Mhm.
And I have dabbled in other things like TikTok and Snapchat and things like that. And I've seen success over there, but I keep coming back to YouTube because it's just the best platform if you're gonna do video. Um, and so as I was consulting for other people, I decided um, I need to take YouTube a little bit more seriously and go all in on myself. And so I've taken a lot of the practices and a lot of the things that I know work and the things that I've learned and the things that I've kind of accumulated in terms of um, just the overall know-how on YouTube. Um, and I just started applying that to my own channel and it's doing great. The first video, um, it hit like 50,000 views right out the gate. I think it's sitting at like 50, 55, 56,000 views
Mhm.
for a brand new channel. The Kenneth Copeland video hit, I think it's almost at like 85,000, something like that for a second video. That's remarkable. And then the third video is a little bit lower, maybe a thousand and a half or something like that. But it just shows that a lot of the things that I learned over the years and a lot of the best practices, um, it defies what other people think when it comes to YouTube. Like, oh, you have to make a whole bunch of videos and then eventually you'll make your way to the top somewhere. Or it's impossible to grow on YouTube right now. You just can't do it. And none of that is true. And I think a big part of the channel was also to kind of to provide some proof and to provide proof for some of my peers and some of my friends, but also people who are looking to get into YouTube and do YouTube for themselves. It's like, I'm gonna get on YouTube and I'm gonna make 300 videos and not go anywhere and then say it doesn't work. But a lot of people don't use the best practices or even understand the culture of YouTube or what makes a good YouTube video or thumbnails or packaging or anything like that. And so I'm passionate about that. Um, and it just became just a really cool driving force behind helping other Christian content creators because I want to be able to help grow the kingdom in my gifting, and that just happens to be my gifting.
Yeah, that's awesome. You talked about YouTube culture, and if you could compare and maybe give your definition of the two different cultures as far as social media culture and then YouTube culture, how would you explain that the two are different?
Yeah, that's a good question. So social media culture is very drive by. So if you're on Instagram, if you're on TikTok or You're on Twitter or X. I don't know what you call it now. I feel bad calling it Twitter, but because never mind. We'll just call it X for the sake of Elon. So yeah, so if you're on any other platform, Facebook, Meta, whatever, it's all drive by. People will see your video for a moment, they'll heart it, and then they kind of move on. And that's what we call um, it's just drive by. There's two types of content. There's like lean in and there's lean back. And kind of lean back content is, you don't really care too much. You're kind of just going through, scrolling, and
Hmm.
you see a video, you like it, and you kind of move on. But you get those lean in types of content, and that's a little bit more long form. These are long form videos on YouTube, and um, that's where you're going to see more community. So the difference between the two is one is very drive by, very quick. Nobody cares. They don't remember you. They may see a cool video. You may go viral. I have friends who have gone viral multiple times, have multiple tens of thousands of followers on Instagram, and they're like, I don't really have a community, and I'm not really making any money. Nobody really remembers me, but it's cool that I have a bunch of numbers on these videos. And I think that's cool, but there just seems to be almost no way to utilize that in the way that you can on YouTube. And so on YouTube, I think long form is going to be the best in terms of creating a powerful community, people who lean in and will watch long form content and really engage and um, click on links when you ask them to go check something out, which is it's insane. I've been on TikTok. I've had tens of thousands. I think I had like currently now it's sitting at like 65,000 on my TikTok back when I was doing TikTok stuff. It's labeled Dizzy Disciple now, but I was going under a different name and doing other things. And I decided to post something on, I was like, hey, I'm gonna start my YouTube up, come and check this out. And nobody would go to it. Nobody wanted to check anything out that I was doing. It kind of just became this like this thing I had to like twist somebody's arm to do anything.
Hmm.
And on YouTube, I've noticed now, if I ask somebody to go check out my Patreon, if I ask somebody to go check out my um, link or whatever, they're more apt to do that because I have a community. They care more. And looking at some statistics, I don't remember who wrote this. I'll have to find it. But there was a statistic of people who are most willing to leave the website to go venture off onto other links, and YouTube was like right at the top. It was like Facebook and YouTube. People are willing to click on links that would bring them to an external site. I think it was like first YouTube, second Facebook, and like way down at the bottom, it's like TikTok and Snapchat and some of these places. And so that was a telling thing for me because I want to be able to build an email list and gather support through Patreon and things like that. And so it's very important for me to have YouTube there where people are going to engage and click on those links and get out there. So um yeah, long-winded answer for you, but
No, that's awesome. I've got a couple of comments, but I've got one more question for you. So you talk about drive-by content and how social media, in a term I'll throw out, and I may be wrong in using this term, but social media can sometimes feel cheap, in the sense of like, sure, people mean well, or maybe they have a message that they want to get out, and like there's heart behind it. However, it is very grabbing onto the first thing that I can get and making a quick reaction, like you had mentioned, kind of just pulling out your iPhone and doing whatever there is. And what I've noticed is that, at least for me, it feels like social media content has about a 24-hour lifespan, and then it's dead. It's gone. Sometimes the algorithm does its thing. But with that in mind, with it kind of being this drive-by, almost very uh I don't even know the word of floaty. There's not a lot of substance to it. That's the word I'll use. Is that really the type of content that Christians ought to be creating? And that's I feel like there's a lot behind that question. So I understand, but should we be the ones of all people creating the drive-by content? What are your thoughts on that?
Right. Yeah. And I love talking content theory, and we can get into some weeds here, but honestly, I feel like it depends on your mission and your conviction. And so I see some drive-by content that I feel like it can be helpful and it's fun, and I think it's exciting for some people. And I had some drive-by content stuff in the apologetic space that did great. And I had people messaging me. I would receive maybe 10 to 15 messages a week, just like, hey, you changed my mind on this topic. I had no idea. I never had that viewpoint. I never even considered that position, but that really got me thinking. And then I had other people who were like, um, I was, this close to leaving my church and becoming an agnostic, and I saw your video, and that was one of like the biggest pain points for me, and it just changed my mind. And I'm going to church, and I'm thriving in my faith, and now I'm getting into apologetics and stuff like that. And I thought that was just remarkable, and that was all from just creating short form content on TikTok and on Instagram and things like that. And so I think there is some value there, but at the same time, I think like as Christians, we tend to play second string. And what I mean by that is if you listen to like Christian radio, and you hear a rock song or a somebody like a pop artist or something like that, they sound eerily similar to a mainstream artist. It's like they're Christian artists and Christian creatives and Christian creators are constantly trying to emulate these mainstream artists and kind of bring that into the Christian world. And I think that's a shame. I think it's sad. I think it's a bummer for a number of different reasons. I think that we should be on top when it comes to like creating things. Like we are children of the ultimate creator, and so I think we're better than that. And so when you see Christian content creators on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and they are trying to be the so and so of the mainstream world, I think that's when it becomes a trap. And I think that's when it's not useful. Um, and that could be a little controversial. Like it could be useful. God can use anything. I'll say that. I think it's lame, and it can only go so far. And so I think that we should be um, really self-aware when it comes to our identity, who we are as creatives, as creators, as artists, people who, um, are online with a message. Like we're representing the ultimate creator, and so I think that's enough to just say I should be able to utilize the gifts that God has given me and be an ambassador of the ultimate creator and that functioning. And so that's why I think long form content is so much better because you can take your time on it. Um, but also I have friends who are killing it, just crushing it in the short form space, and they create things that don't um uh it's something that we don't constantly see in the Christian space. Like right now, what we see is I'm going to dunk on somebody or I'm going to react to a video, and I think that's it's so played out. Like the whole heresy hunting thing, and I get lumped in with the heresy hunter guys. I'm really not. I swear I'm really not. But you could put me in that space if you want to. And I have some heresy hunting friends that are great, but I'm not I'm not that guy. And I love seeing Christian content folks creating things externally from the heresy hunting and reacting to videos or trying to dunk on Mike Todd or something. And I feel like the trap is, "Oh, I'm going to react to this video, or I'm going to argue with this individual, or I'm going to have this argument in place." And a lot of these people who are creating these are, well, they're not apologists, they're not theologians, they're not Bible teachers, they're not scholars, they don't really know, um, you know, theology and deep apologetics and things like that. And I think there's a lot of danger in that for a number of different reasons, because some people, they just don't have the accountability the way that people who are in the academic space do. And so when the problem with drive-by content is like anybody can pick up their phone and just start presenting an argument. And oftentimes that can be detrimental to the body of Christ because I've heard some awful arguments that are, borderline heretical. It surely heterodox, but borderline heretical. And I have to step in and say, hey, what did you mean when you say that? Because what you're expressing there is modalism, and maybe you don't know that. And so they're like, it's like zeal without knowledge, and and I can appreciate somebody's angst to say like, hey, I want to do something great for the body of Christ. But on the other hand, I have friends who are like, they're like, I'm not an apologist. I know a little bit of apologetics. I can use that in my day-to-day life. And I use that with my friends and my neighbors and my family and at church. But really, I'm just an audio guy. Like I'm an audio guy. And so I make audio stuff. Like I have a friend who does like voiceover. Like he'll take like Zac Efron or something and do a funny bad lip reading of him, and it blows up and it takes off because God has given him a special gifting and a talent to do something like that. And now he's in the Christian space, like as a Christian, and he is glorifying the name of God, and he's promoting the name of Christ. But now he has like hundreds of thousands of eyeballs on him who are like, I saw this made me laugh. It was funny. It brought joy to my life. And I see that you love Jesus. And that's such it's just it's a functioning that is different from operating in something that you maybe know very little about. And so I want to express the point that it's like, hey, you don't have to be William Lane Craig. Like you don't have to be Jeff Durbin or whatever. It's like you don't have to be the typical uh like Christian content creator. And I saw that in myself where I was like, I don't want to just sit here and react to heresies that you hear from like goofy, weird preachers in Oklahoma or whatever. I want to be able to take the gifts that I have, but also implement my testimony.
Mm.
And that's why the documentaries kind of came to fruition. And that's why it works, is because I'm creating an expression of my gifting and my talent that God has given me. And I didn't have to sit back and try to be somebody else.
Yeah.
So
So, put it in a hypothetical. You have a Christian who sees the majority of content on social media and they see it's reactionary. Like, okay, somebody said heresy. I'm going to react and throw in my 2 cents, even though that's not really their expertise. But on the other side, this Christian like has a great love for cooking and baking. You look at that Christian and they have an interest in creating content. They see what's popular versus what they love. You would say use the gifts that you actually have rather than pursuing what's popular. Is that correct?
oh, absolutely, yeah. And
Yeah.
I see that in the lives of I have friends who have amazing channels. And so let me give you a couple of examples. So I have look at say Jay Stu is a YouTube channel who, like, we all know that they love Jesus because they express that they love Jesus, but they don't create Christian content the way that the Christian content creators do. They have a passion to build giant forts and to do these crazy cookie challenges. And then they have live streams on Instagram and on YouTube and on other places where they're proclaiming the name of Christ. They're sharing the gospel, and you see that their viewers are going, "Whoa, I never thought about that at all. That's amazing." And so they're entering into a space, and they're being a light in a dark portion of the internet or maybe the world, or into somebody's life. You have people like I mean, I can go on and on, and I don't want to list names, but I'll just I want to express that you don't have to just place yourself into this mold because you think like that's what you have to do. And so I think it's a tragedy when that happens. And also, I just think there needs to be less voices. Um, in certain spaces. Like I've always expressed this, and people give me flack for it, but I honestly believe that less people should be teachers. I think less people should be preachers and less people should be pastors unless God has, you know, truly called you to it. And you have to understand like the weightiness of that. And so there are folks who I've talked to who are like, um, you know, I've been saved for 3 months. Like, here I am. I'm on TikTok. I'm on TikTok Live. I'm doing these apologetics battles and debates. I'm about to debate this renowned atheist, and I'm like, I just think I think it's a sign of immaturity, and I don't think it's wise. I don't think it's a good thing. I love the zeal behind it. I love the passion behind it, but there are people who are really, excuse me, really good at certain things that would make a solid impact for the kingdom if they just utilize their gift.
Yeah.
Like if you're a drummer, then drum. Like drum for the Lord, do all things to the glory of Christ, and then like he will use it. He will use it, and yeah. So
No, I had a friend once tell me about how he believes there are many miserable congregations because their pastor wasn't called to be a pastor, and there are many miserable businessmen because they're not pursuing their calling to actually be a pastor. And I think that can apply to content creation as well, in that you may be scratching your head thinking, okay, why can't I get an audience? Or why can't I build this community? Well, it may be because you're trying to be something that you weren't created to be. And I believe, and I'd be curious to know your thoughts. A community or an audience can tell, right? They can smell it if you're doing something that you weren't made to do. In maybe you've experienced this, but there is content that just does not feel natural. So I 100% agree with you. Do what you've been equipped to do. Do what you've been called to do. Now, I do have a question for you on this, and kind of segue over. You made the point before the launch of your YouTube channel, I believe, and you made it very clear that you were going to take this direction of gospel centered content. Now, we've kind of talked about already what standard Christian content looks like and what you're breaking away from. And I just want to kind of put it on the table here for you. Would you agree that gospel centered content does not always have to be, 3 points in a poem type sermon content, but somebody drumming for the glory of God, or somebody cooking for the glory of God, or doing a voiceover for the glory of God can be considered gospel centered content? Would you agree with that?
oh yeah, 100%. And also here's the thing. If you are doing something outside of what God has called you to do, um, I'll put it to you this way. Um, a monkey can swim, but it doesn't live in the water. Like it's best for a monkey to just go climb and climb trees because that's what a monkey's, like natural intrinsic value is just to go climb trees. Like that's what you were designed for. And if you start operating out of what God has designed you for, you're gonna burn out. You're not gonna enjoy it. It's gonna become this slog, and you're not gonna want to um it's hard, and I've been there, and I've placed myself in positions where although I'm decent at doing this thing, or I'm good at doing this thing, it doesn't mean I'm always called to that thing. And I think that's hard, especially for people who would consider themselves like a jack of all trades. They're like, oh, I'm a jack of all trades and kind of a master of none, and I can do a whole bunch of things good. Um, but ultimately, there's one thing that you are more passionate about, and there is one thing that you know more about, and I think that you should capitalize on that. And also, you want to get into like content creation with something that's called an unfair advantage. Whatever your unfair advantage is, you should be utilizing that instead of operating in like a space in a realm where everybody else has this unfair advantage, like this unique talent and ability or knowledge or whatever it is. Like they have an upper hand somewhere, and then you place yourself into that arena, you're going to default all the way to the bottom. And so for me personally, I'll speak for myself. like I'm a decent editor. I'm a good editor. I know how to edit. I love making documentaries. That's my passion. And I know YouTube. And so going into YouTube, the last thing I'm going to do is, live stream or get into gaming or, start doing cover songs or something like that. Because although I can potentially do those things, that's not my unfair advantage. And so like a big point of contention for people is like, well, I have this thing that I want to do, um, but then I have this thing that I'm really good at. I think you should just do the thing that you're really good at, and don't allow these things that you are infatuated with, because infatuations will fade, but the things that God has given you, those gifts and those talents and abilities, He's going to build it. He's going to build it. So just operate in that. Um, go in swinging with your strong arm, have your unfair advantage, and it's so much more fulfilling. And so, yeah, I can't express that enough because I know chefs and people with cooking channels who love the Lord deeply and they're touching lots of lives, and you can do things in the Christian space as a chef, as a cook, and you're just like, well, how can I do that? Well, you know what? God is a very creative God, and he works it out. He'll find a way. And like I have a friend who again is a chef, and he's like, now I'm creating a recipe book, like a cookbook based upon the like Mediterranean food that Jesus ate. And people are seeing that, and now it's becoming this conversational topic about the life of Christ, the life of Jesus. He's adding verses to this, and people are like, yo, this is like a devotional now. Um, and so there are creative functionings that people can operate in with the gifts and the things that they're already passionate about, the things that they already know, the things that they can already do. And so, yeah, absolutely. Start that channel. Do the thing for the Lord.
That's huge. I recently was having lunch with someone, and the topic of ministry came up, and they just lamented over how, you know, people don't want to be full-time pastors anymore. People don't want to go into full-time ministry anymore. And it kind of struck me as odd, and maybe it was a little discouraging for me, because I look at someone like you, and you, to my knowledge, you're not a pastor of a church. You are what I would consider a very unconventional form of ministry, but your one video has now reached 80,000 plus people that is now fighting against the prosperity gospel. So, what would your encouragement be to somebody who feels this draw to do ministry, but they know they're not called to be like full time church ministry, but yet they feel like they're lesser for going into content creation or a media space? What would your encouragement be to them?
Yeah, and so I'll preface it by saying this. I did pastor a church for some years. Um, for close to I was in ministry um for almost a decade, but I was pastoring a church for about 5 years or so. And the difference between pastoring a church and communicating a message online is it's a night and day difference. And so the reason why people don't want to be pastors is because there's a lot that goes on there. There's a lot of accountability, and it can be very stressful, and you're on the clock, and you have to be involved in people's lives and their problems and their issues, and you have to walk alongside them. You don't get to do drive-by stuff. Like you are in the mud, like you are in the weeds, and it doesn't go away. And so you go to sleep and you wake up and the problem is still there. And you have to answer some real and raw and awful questions and terrible issues that come up. And you have to make sense of them. And you're walking through these like travesties, and it can weigh on you. And that's hard. And the amount of funerals that I've done is sad, and it was hard. And so for those types of folks who are like, I want to get into pastoral ministry, well, maybe what you want to do is you want to communicate a message, and maybe you want to just speak to, a specific community. Maybe you have this desire to be on stage or in the pulpit because you feel like you have this message that you want to share with the world, and maybe you should instead do public speaking, and maybe instead you should have an online platform. I think that's great. And I'll say this on the record. I honestly think like Michael Todd, he should just be a public speaker. I don't think he should be a pastor. I think he should step down. I think he should operate in a different space. And I think he would do potentially do some great things for the kingdom of God. But he's thrusted himself into a position where he doesn't belong. And that's a good example of like you're just operating in the wrong space. And the people who belong in the pulpit are there are some people in the church, in the pews. I think there's some older gentlemen, potentially listening to this podcast right now and thinking like I've been sitting in the pews and I felt this tug on my heart. I feel like God has called me to pastoral ministry, but I don't know if I'm equipped. I just want to let you know the age-old adage that we heard in youth group growing up still rings true. Uh, God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called.
Hmm.
And so there's some older gentlemen who probably feel like my time is already run out. I don't have any life left in me. That's not true. I think you potentially could pastor even the church that you're in now. And I think it takes very specific individuals, very specific men of God to stand up and take on those issues and confront them in their church. Um, the things that a lot of younger folks don't want to do, or maybe can't do, or maybe ought not do. And so it kind of just depends on where you're at. And so I feel like, and I know that's kind of a heavy message there, but I I feel like the two big differences online, there's not much accountability outside of mob rule. If you say something, then you better be sure to have some information to back that because mob mentality will come for you. The internet never forgets. So just if you're gonna pick up your phone and just start rambling and going off on certain things, I don't think that's wise. I think it's dumb. I think you can get yourself into a lot of trouble doing that. So be very precise with your words, what you say, what you do, how you what you're going to communicate. So that's kind of a warning there. But if you're a pastor, um, I feel like there's a little bit more grace from the community. You say something kind of dumb, and you go, "Hey, last week I said this. Some of you brought it to my attention. I just want to clarify that's not what I meant. I'm so sorry. Here's that. Boom, you move on. And now because you're engaged in these people's lives and you're with them. They know you. You know them. You go to the hospital with them. You're breaking bread with them. And so it's a totally different dynamic. And the reason why we think they're so similar is because we have these preachers who have like these outstanding Instagram and YouTube channels, and they almost seem like they're content creators, but they're not. I have pastor friends who are like, I don't even get on Instagram. We have like a media team who just like takes our sermons and kind of creates this thing and throws it out there. And then I'm walking, then I'm in like, uh, I'm in LAX at the airport and somebody's like, "Hey, I know you from Instagram." I'm like, I never get on Instagram. That's not even my MO. And so we do see this like odd crossover. But the problem is young Christians and maybe somebody who doesn't understand um, like the social media space or the internet space, they connect the two, and they're like, "Oh no, that's how I have to be. I have to be Craig Groeschel, or I have to be, enter in this popular preacher or whatever." And so they kind of long for that sort of like platform. Like I want to be seen as wise, and people can listen to me, and I have these like this sage advice and man, I look cool. I'm up there, and we deceive ourselves thinking that's ministry, and that's not. And although I'm in a space where I'm doing ministerial things, it's almost I'm almost hard pressed to say that this is a ministry. Um, and some would say that's a cop out. Like you are doing ministry and you should be held accountable for like the ministerial message that you're presenting and the thing that you're doing. And there's a conversation there. I don't know where I stand. It definitely is gospel centric. It is ministerial, but is this a traditional ministry? I I'm almost willing to say no because it's a slap in the face to ministers who are truly like in the trenches doing ministry. And so that's I mean it's a big thing that you need to learn to split. It's like where do you stand? What are you doing? What does that look like? If you're gonna be in ministry, then be in traditional ministry with accountability, with like a pastor above you. You're being discipled. You're discipling people. You're being held accountable to the community and the church body. You have a board over you, whatever that looks like. And if you say something stupid, you will be called out lovingly. There will be grace, but there will be correction there. Um, that's ministry. Like do that. If God has called you to ministry, then do that. Now, if it's social media space stuff, then you're gonna open up your phone and say whatever you want. And there's not going to be any accountability outside of somebody making a reaction to you, and you just kind of whatever. And I look at that in the lives of people like Young Don. I don't know if you know like Young Don Reborn. He was like a new Christian and he's creating these videos and they're getting hundreds of thousands of views. And he's like, yeah, expressing um, the things that are orthodox Christian beliefs. And then he just like shifted right into heresy, denied the deity of Christ, and people are just like, yeah, going along with it.
Mm.
I'm like, there's no accountability there. How do you stop this? Now, if you're a pastor and you're on, Sunday service and you start saying that Jesus is not God, then you should have the sound guy shut your mic off. Like you should have somebody take a hook, like a
Yep.
like a Bugs Bunny hook and ring it around your neck and pull you off of that pulpit. It will happen. If not, you will be yelled at from the pews like you should be. That should be the logical next step. Like you should not be preaching like all communication is stopped right there. Um, that's what ministry looks like to me, accountability. And we don't see that in the social media space. So,
Mm. That's huge. So, talking about pastoral ministry and like having this message, you had made the point that YouTube, you find it easier to build like actually connected communities, like people actually care enough to click the link on YouTube. Do you think that would be a contributor for why Christians may want to try to shift over to YouTube because they are going to be able to find maybe a little bit more accountability where there's more community?
yeah, and I think that's such a that's a big thing. That's a huge thing. Um, well, first of all, if your pastor isn't aware that you're making content online,
Mm.
like gospel centric, ministerial type content online, I think that's a big no-no. Like I just think it's not a good thing. I think you should at least, the very least, express to your pastor, hey, I'm online. I have a following. I am creating this content, and this should be like the pastor of a church that you're a member of or that you're faithfully attending, and they should know and be able to kind of take a peek into your life and to maybe ask you, why did you post that? Or let me hear your thoughts on that here. Um, that is that's the best accountability for you. If it can't be your pastor because maybe your church is big and he just doesn't have any time or whatever, there is there's somebody at your church who can walk alongside you, who can disciple you in that. It is so important. So first and foremost, do that. You need that accountability. So no matter what you're doing, that should be the case. And it shouldn't always just be faithful brothers, because I think that's a good thing too. But I've had some awful takes. I'll tell you what, okay? I've had some really bad takes that I have since shifted from, and nobody called me out on it. Like I had no brothers in the faith who were like, "Hey, I'm gonna DM you," and although I was in error and I take full responsibility of that, like I had some faithful brothers who were like, "No, I know your heart and I love you," and would not engage in conversation there because maybe they just respect. It felt like a yes man type of thing, And
Yep.
so get rid of the yes men stuff. Like have people, because you're bound to make mistakes, especially people who just pop open their phone and then run their mouth, kind of like what I'm doing. You just ramble and you say something dumb. And so, and oftentimes there's no heart behind that, and I get that, and there's grace there. But at the end of the day, there needs to be some semblance of accountability somewhere that should be from your pastoral, like the pastoral staff or your pastor at your church or an elder or somebody who's outside of that realm, not
Yep.
your buddy. Um, so there's that. But yeah, clicking on links and stuff like that when it comes to YouTube, it's like building that community, having people there who can walk alongside you. And also when you have a community centered around a very specific topic or message, they're not going to let you off the hook. You can lose your following for saying something dumb. I have a friend who like was crushing it on TikTok, and then he said something about like he said something about Mary, and it kind of it came off in a very specific way, and he lost half his Patreon members. They were like, "Nope, I'm out." And whatever the conversation was, I don't know, but he said something about, Mary or whatever, and people got mad, and he lost half his Patreon members, he lost half his funding, and he was pulling his hair out, going, "Wow, I should have washed my mouth. Like I should have been a little bit more, um, maybe a little bit more careful with my words when it comes to when it came to that." But he was kind of like blatant, like, "Hey, everybody loves me. I have my thing or whatever." And surely it won't matter, but it did matter. And so I just I think it's powerful to have a community of people who are going to hold you accountable to that degree, at least knowing like I cannot venture off into that because I know that's not going to be good for me. The community will let me know. Um, but that's not enough to stop you. But your pastor knocking on your door, "Hey, you said something. Maybe you should take that down because that's modalism, Patrick, and you don't want to you don't want to go there." But
Mhm.
yeah, long story.
That's huge. I man, I hate when real people know about my page. It's I say real people. I hate when people that I have to like see in real life know about it. But that is something that I've had to get over. And like we just recently joined a church like February of this year. And that was one of the first conversations. And I felt so cringy saying, like, I have this page and sometimes I say things, but like, it's always under the authority of the church. But there is something, I guess I'll say this for anybody who's like curious about the poking stick as a whole, it is 100% accountable to a local church. And if I ever say anything that is heretical, there is somebody who will stop me. So I'll put that stamp out there that, yeah, I agree. And it's just a wisdom practice of we're human, and sometimes you can get caught up in the rush of social media, and sometimes you speak quicker than you ought. And yeah, I totally agree. That's a great point. So moving forward, you obviously have made a pretty powerful case for YouTube being a platform, if you will, that you can build a house on. You've shared in the past, just as far as earning an income, like you're able to do that far easier. I don't want to say easier, but there's maybe a clearer path to earning and monetization on YouTube compared to Instagram or TikTok. And you have to get astronomically more views to make way less on social media. So YouTube definitely is the future. And I agree with that. Now, with the type of content that you're producing on YouTube, it's definitely more of an essay documentary style. And I want to pick your brain on that because what's been drilled into us is quick, short, catchy reels or TikToks or whatever, make it snappy, 15 seconds tops. But then you see the rise of anything from 10 minutes to 2 hour long essays on YouTube. So I want to pick your brain a little bit on why you think that is trending and where do you think the essay style content is going? And do you think it will ever make its way over to social media? Do you think Instagram and TikTok will cave? Because they've already lengthened like how long a video can be. So do you think they'll cave eventually?
Yeah, interesting question. So the pendulum swings um, constantly. And so at the inception of YouTube, we had these very quick, um, Charlie bit my finger, very fast, like almost memey type of, things
Yep.
that existed. And people love that. It was fun. It was just this like short quip that you can kind of say at work with your friends. You can use it. It's almost like it's just things that you can kind of spout off and be funny with. It's a cultural thing. Ow, Charlie, and somebody laughs at that. Oh yeah, that was so funny. I did see
Mhm.
that. And so that was like the beginning of YouTube. Um, then you have like this shift into something that's a little bit more professional. And you start to see people who, wow, they actually know how to run a camera. Wow, there is some like consistency here. And this actually looks like a show. That's kind of cool. There's a niche behind this. That's awesome. And then it kind of started to shift back into these really quick um like sketch comedy things. And then from there it went back into this like longer, more intentional sit down story time vloggy, sort so it kind of just like ebbs and it flows. And now the we had like PewDiePie who did not edit his videos at all, really hardly. And he definitely edited his videos, but what I mean is like there wasn't like this production value behind it.
Mhm.
uh it was just him in front of a camera
Yep.
and kind of being silly, and that was his topic, and he was at the top of his game. And then Mr. Beast comes in and there was like a ton of production, and then it feels like a show. And then now we have people who are sitting in front of a camera who don't edit at all or even have a title or a thumbnail, like Sam Sulek, and is doing great and pulling hundreds of thousands of views and has like a massive community. And so it ebbs and it flows. And I used to think that um, it's going to be one way or the other. In terms of popularity, for sure, there is a pendulum that exists. It goes from like, here's the heavily produced stuff, and it kicks back over to the more indie guerrilla feel style content, because people get sick of just being force fed this like corporate um, style content. They want something a little bit more real, something a little bit more accessible, emotionally. And I just I think that there's room for every type of content on YouTube. And if you're going to do high production value stuff, make sure that you are in a niche that you're passionate about, something that you know about, something that has an existing community, um, and something that you're going to be able to play off of. Okay, let me give you like a really good example of what I mean. If if there is a um, there's something that exists that's called total market value, and there are people who kind of enter into a space. They're like, let's say this, like I'm going to enter into gaming, and I am just going to do like lazy, turn on my iPhone and just kind of just shoot the breeze, just create gaming content, whatever. It's not going to fly. You're going to have to go way heavier production value. You're going to have to be way more consistent. You're going to have like a set niche. You're going to have a community. You're going to have to find your space somewhere, because you're going to have to stand out, because there is a sea of people doing the same exact thing that you're doing. So the bigger the total addressable market, like the more production value and the more effort you're going to have to put into it. So if you have a smaller total addressable market, then the lower the production value. And I feel like a lot of people don't understand that. They're like, hey, I'm gonna go into gaming or whatever, and it's not working. YouTube hates me. Well, no, you're doing exactly what 500,000 other people are doing. How do you set yourself apart? And the way Mr. Mr. Beast did, it was like, hey, I'm going high production value. This is what I'm going to do for my challenges. They're going to be more ridiculous. They're going to be, more professional. They're going to be, that's where he found his way. Um, and in the Christian space, it kind of gets a little mucky because you see these people who are consistently that have a consistent viewership, but they kind of got in early on the Christian space where you didn't need to do that. The total addressable market was smaller, and the community at large was smaller, and so they didn't have to come in with production value. And so now you have these like legacy style creators who still exist and they have a following. And then you have this new Christian who comes in and goes, well, I'm going to watch this guy and thinks that that is the standard. And then they create that and they don't go anywhere. And they go, well, what the heck? This guy can just turn on his camera and rant about this and that. And well, why can't I do that? Well, because of the total addressable market, you're gonna have to do something different. You're gonna have to do something better. And so, no matter where you're at, what you're doing, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, I don't care. If you can look at the total addressable market, you can look at the community, and you can offer a value and have a specific value that is either better or the same as the top performing people, then you're in the money. If you can't, and I don't mean in the money as in like you're gonna be rich. I just mean you're like that's a good place to be in when it comes to building a community and having an online presence is like, can I do this better or the same as the top creators there? Um, and so when I'm working with anybody, the thing that I say is, hey, go find the top 10, the top 20 creators in this niche. And if you can identify some, like, if you can identify the fact that you can do either the same as or better than them, then you can enter into a space. And you can be confident knowing that it's going to go somewhere. But that's not always the case. For some people, they just kind of say, well, so and so turns on the camera and just it's just like a bedroom with a dirty room, and he talks and it's like 720p camera, and he has millions of views and stuff. um Moist critical or whatever, and I'm like, that doesn't that's the exception to the rule. Like that's not the rule, and he's been doing it for a very long time. So you're looking at like a legacy creator and then assuming that that's the standard. And so what you want to do is go find a younger channel who has like a lower sub count and a higher view count, and look at the threshold. And then if you can do what he's doing at the same value or better, then I think you should enter into that space. If not, then maybe recalibrate, find something else. And so um, I don't know if Instagram and TikTok and some of these places are going to do more, if they're going to be a little bit more patient with like essay creators or documentary creators. I hope so. I just don't know. I think the culture is just what the culture is. And so you have a culture on YouTube that is specifically like, you go to YouTube with that in mind. It has a very specific um, use case. But if you go to like Instagram, there is a very specific use case there. Like, I'm on the toilet, I'm in the waiting room, like I'm in bed before I go to sleep, things like that. And when you're on YouTube, you're like, I'm having a meal, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sitting down, I'm gonna lean in. It has my attention. I need something to entertain me, or I need to learn something. I need to investigate something. And so that has two very different use case scenarios. And I don't know if Instagram can do that with the way that they're operating now. TikTok is we've seen some success when it comes to like live video, but again, it's almost like I'm hanging out. I'm not totally invested. It's there. It exists. Um, I just don't know. I don't think so until something really changes. I hope X could maybe deliver on that sort of space. So far, it doesn't look like it. Again, I get on X because it's like I want to see what the industry is doing. I want to see what my community is up to. I want to see what my niche is doing. I want to see what some of my favorite pastors and preachers and voices in the whatever space. I want to see what they're up to. And it's almost like I'm checking in on somebody. If I saw a documentary, I don't know if I'd click on it and watch it. I'm not there yet. But on
Mhm.
YouTube, I go there with a very specific um, mission in mind. So yeah, if whatever you're doing, make sure that you have the right platform. So if you're like, I create documentaries, I'm on Instagram, I don't know. I wouldn't
Mhm.
do that. I would move on over to something else that makes a little bit more sense. So
Yeah, and you talked about finding that market or that niche. Kind of off topic, but I'm curious to know, is there really a niche for everyone, or is there a little bit of realism that you have to go into it with of like maybe this is a very, very, very specific niche that though nobody else is doing it, that doesn't automatically mean that it's going to attract people. So is there really a niche for everybody? Is everybody's interest able to be put on a platform, I guess, on YouTube?
I will Yeah, I will give that a resounding yes. So it's so weird. Like you have no idea the the amount of weird channels that I've come across where I'm like, this doesn't make any sense why this would have a community, but it does. Like, okay, so look at Ants Canada. I don't know if you're familiar with Ants Canada,
Okay.
but it's a channel that literally has like thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe tens of thousands, probably more realistic, but like tens of thousands of ants. And he makes these like videos about ants. Like he has a colony, one colony over here. He's I almost said videotaping. I'm that old. So he's videotaping uh he's he's filming this colony of ants and he's going through like the lore of these ants. And then he has like another colony over here and he's going through the lore of that colony. And then he shows them like clashing and then there's a battle and stuff like that. It's freaking ants. And there's like a massive crowd behind that. I'm like, this is ants. And I'm like crying because there's like this one ant. I don't know. So I just your niche, yes, is on YouTube. Like bar none, without a doubt, you're going to find your community, your niche on YouTube. And you know what? It may take a little bit longer, but just keep showing up, keep being consistent. Your video might not get 50,000. I highly doubt it'll get 50,000 on your first video. It's very, very, very rare. And the only reason why it happened on my channel is because I sat down for 6 months and I analyzed and I prepared and I went through this and I had the ability and the accessibility to big name creators who can kind of guide me in the right direction and tell me where to go and what I'm doing wrong here and what they would do. And so there was like a team behind what I'm doing in terms of the like the direction and the help. And so like there is that. But people who are just who don't have insider knowledge, who don't have that information, who may not have any best practices in mind, like you're gonna create videos that just they stink. They're no good. And you kind of want to start off that way, but be a little bit more intentional with what you're creating and what you're doing, and you'll see that it'll take off somewhere. You'll get your community. So the niche, yeah, everybody has a niche. Like even just the weirdest niches that you can conceptualize or even consider, like they're on YouTube somewhere. It's weird. I know I watch this guy who opens old food, like expired food from 1970, like 1940, 1920. He's like, here's a can of beans. It's from 1920. I'm going to open it up. And he has a community behind it. And they have their own little, like um, I was going to say primal branding. So there's a book called Primal Branding, and it talks about these like sacred words, and it talks about these um, just these like little nuances that you would find in like folks who have been creating content for a long time, like PewDiePie, like the bro fist. Like everybody
Mhm.
knows, like pound it like bro fist. Like that's it's like that's his thing. And so you get these people who have like, I'm opening a can of beans, and the second it like pops open, people like will say something in the comments about the pop, or they'll rate it or whatever. Or if you look at like Dave Portnoy eating pizza, they're like, everybody knows the rules. Like you go to the comment section, it's like um, it's like cheese was greasy and dripping all over my hand, and a man flipped me off on the subway. Everybody knows the rules. That's like one cheese pizza that burnt the inside of my throat. Everybody knows the rules, and it's like that's a part of the community. Like that's a weird niche thing that exists. Like some guy on the sidewalk eating pizza saying like I'm gonna rate it. And so you can find your niche no matter how little, no matter how weird, no matter how odd it exists. I promise you, if somebody came up to me and was like, "Hey, I'm gonna be a gamer and I'm gonna like game on Minecraft," I'd go, "Okay, that I don't know if that'll work. Maybe I hope so. Like let's see. Go ahead and try." I don't have much faith in it. But if somebody came up to me and was like, "Hey, I'm gonna test peanut butter. I'm just gonna test like a bunch of peanut butter, and then I'm gonna rate it." My money is on the peanut butter guy. Like my money
Hmm.
is on the peanut butter guy. And that's just the way YouTube is. It's so odd, it's so weird. So the more that you can niche down, and if you're struggling with that, you're like, I don't have like a weird hyper focused niche. And that's okay. Just try to niche down as much as you possibly can in the beginning, and then kind of move forward from there. Sorry, I lost my train of thought because when I say in the beginning, my kids they always yell in the beginning. So in the beginning,
Yeah.
you want to start with a niche and kind of expand from there. You want to be able to explore other topics and other things, and your community can grow with you. But the problem is, some people they stay hyper focused on that niche, and it doesn't really grow. It doesn't expand. It doesn't really go anywhere. So you have to be wise as to like how long have you overstayed your welcome,
Hmm.
and where are you expanding out into? Um, the answer is yes. Like find a real weird niche, jump in and do it for the glory of God, and God's going to be like, "Welcome, good and faithful servant, the peanut butter tester who rated the Jiffy versus the Kroger brand. I
Yeah.
love what you did. That was great."
So now we just need to figure out how to blend ant content and peanut butter content. And I think that's maybe like the most hyper niche that we can make at this point.
Yeah, and the two top things is like babies and cats. So just go rub a bunch of peanut butter on your dog and baby and roll them around in ants and then film them and rate it. Give it I don't know. Don't do that. That's awful.
Oh man. So I feel like this is a good point to move into kind of a next round of questions here. So let's say day one, I'm going to start fresh. I have like a general idea of like the niche that I want to hit. Like that's kind of already been determined. What would be some practical steps as far as I've shot the content, I'm going to upload it. What would be some practical tips for how to package it, how to design thumbnails? What should that look like for a beginner?
Yeah, and so what you where you want to head in terms of packaging is you want to head on over to the top 10 creators in your niche, and you want to analyze their packaging, and you want to look at the most recent videos that are taking off, and kind of analyze why do those work. And don't stop there though. Go and find channels who have higher view counts and lower sub counts. Look at their packaging. Packaging just means your thumbnail and your title and your topic. And so look for a channel who has a lower sub count, higher view counts on their videos, and begin to analyze what works on those thumbnails. You see like, okay, so they're using like three elements consistently in their thumbnails. It's like three elements. They have a guy, they have a background, and then they have like maybe one word or something like that. It's like, okay, that's a great jumping off point to say that maybe you should maybe utilize the three element rule of a guy, a background, and a font. And and I'm not saying completely bite somebody and rip off their thumbnails or anything like that, but there is a lot of grace when it comes to new creators on YouTube who are creating content and then kind of steal like an artist somebody's thumbnail. And so you can do that when you're starting off. And so what I did was I sat down and I went through hundreds of channels, not just like one or two or three, but I went through hundreds of channels. I looked at all of their thumbnails in my niche. I looked at not only in my niche, but in the documentary space niche. I also looked at, like in the crime space, in the thriller crime drama space, and then I started to create thumbnails based upon those types of those types of like designs. And so, um, sorry, I stopped for a second because I know my dog he's being he's racing around my room right now. So you want to be able to go and find thumbnails and packaging that actually is working for smaller creators, not just like the bigger guys. Because the bigger guys, they can create whatever they want. If you're Mr. Beast, you can have a video that's like, "Hey, I'm eating a donut," and then just whatever packaging they want on there, and it'll work. But for a smaller creator, you don't get that sort of leeway. You don't get that sort of treatment. And so whatever works, begin to emulate that. Look at the packaging and um and what else? I think going outside of your niche is a big thing too. I'll see a thumbnail from like a cooking channel and I'm like, dude, that's sick. I'm gonna use that. And it obviously worked for him, and I'm going to kind of shift it into my niche, and everybody would be none the wiser. They can't say that I jacked somebody in my space's like packaging or whatever because this came from a cooking channel somewhere else. But it's things like that and titles and topics. I would say this: the number one thing that you want to have is your idea, your topic. That's 90% of the battle, is having the right idea and the right topic. And second to that is your thumbnail, and directly after that is your title. And so we tend to see channels that don't succeed because they have weak ideas and they have weak topics. And they're like, well, I paid a thumbnail guy. I have this great thumbnail. I have this great title. Like I really mapped this out. And why isn't it working? And I'm like, well, because the idea is whack. It's silly. Like I can't see the idea being like this hard hitting idea. And so you want to be able to capitalize on those ideas. And what I did was, in order to find the right ideas, was to go and take a look at the topics that are the most viewed topics in the niche that I'm in. So I look at like the top 20 creators and I go, wow, every time that they mention Joe Rogan, like it's massive. And also don't go back like 5 years, even 2 years. Just go back 6 months if you can. Maybe a year, but 6 months, that's the sweet spot. Go back 6 months. Wow. In the last 6 months, they've mentioned Joe Rogan 3 times, and all of those videos have exploded. And so I go, okay, there's like a point of contention there where I'm going, what can I do with Joe Rogan? How can I touch on that? How is this applicable to what I'm talking about right now? And so you want to be able to utilize that. And obviously that's going to be different for somebody who's in the Christian content space, because God is just going to give you a clear direction on what you should be talking about, what you should be addressing, and whatever you should be like communicating. And so like the Lord could tell you, here's what I'm like impressing upon you to discuss next week, and you feel that urge and you're like, okay, I'm going to do that. And so by all means, like follow that, but at the same time, don't wait on that. Go and just do the thing. And so if anybody's hearing this and they're like, they're not operating in this space where they're like, I'm kind of just waiting on God. Well, no, what you're waiting on is permission. And right now I give you permission, like full on, you have permission to go and just find some cool topics and do the thing that you feel most passionate about. Like you have permission, just go and do it. I know the Lord can use it. And that was kind of where I was at. It's like I feel like I just need the permission to do it. Um, so go and find those topics, man. If you see Joe Rogan videos popping off, um, then do it with the caveat knowing that you shouldn't be chasing trends. So trend chasing is not always a good thing because I've touched on topics that I just don't care about. I've had people who are like, "Hey man, are you going to talk about Russell Brand or something or whatever?" And I go and I make the thumbnail and I think I'm going to do it. And I go, I don't care. Like I really don't care. Um, and the beauty of niching down and having a small weird niche community, it's like you don't need to chase trends. Like there is ample amount of topics and things that you can cover because, well, you're passionate about this space, you know this niche, you can come up with 100 different ideas and you can just run with that. And people in these small, weird little niche communities, they eat it up because they don't have this surplus of creators. Like there's a surplus of creators talking about Russell Brand and Mike Todd and all this, whatever. Um, but there is not a surplus of people talking about all of the different Christian denominations. Like I can name one channel. I think it's Ready to Harvest or Ready for Harvest. It's like he's crushing it because, well, his niche is I talk about Christian denominations. Then I kind of pose the two positions, like independent fundamentalist Baptist versus, I don't know, Assemblies of God. Like what are the stark differences? And I'm like, that's interesting. That's weird. And that's not a trend. But in of itself, it's kind of a trend because the versus thing is kind of a trendy use of like a use of packaging. And so hopefully I communicated that well, but it's like the take the things that work and like versus or before and after, or it's almost like a cold versus hot. Take those sorts of trends. Don't take the things that are just gonna die and disappear within the next hour, because you want to be able to have what is called evergreen content. You want to have evergreen content that exists that people can click on year after year after year and just watch it, and it's still relevant year after year after year. Um, but yeah, so do do
That's
the
huge.
do the thing that works. Take a peek at what's working in your niche, and if it's applicable to what you're doing, you can even go outside of your niche and look at what other people are doing too. So
Man, that's awesome. I feel like we could talk about this for hours and hours to come, but I don't want to keep you too long. So thank you for coming on and sharing just an overwhelming amount of wisdom and insight. I hope this becomes a valuable resource for creators, specifically Christian creators looking to get into YouTube. So thank you for contributing. And Dizzy, tell us where we can find you, but then where do you want to be found?
yeah, so yeah, I'm pretty much everywhere. So you can find me primarily on YouTube. So if you just go to youtube.com, you can Google me even just Dizzy Disciple. Find my YouTube, and I'm there. If anybody ever wants to reach out or has questions or kind of just wants to connect, I'm typically on Instagram when it comes to my DMs. I don't create there. It exists as like a community portal. Like I have threatened to like delete Instagram a million times, but the beauty of it is like I utilize the stories portion and I utilize the DMs there. So you can just DM me there and I'm sure to respond. Find me somewhere, DM me somewhere, and I'm there. But yeah, youtube.com/Dizzy Disciple. And I'm excited, man. I'm excited to connect with anybody who sees this. If anybody wants help with starting off and in creating on YouTube or creating content online, I'm your guy. I'm there, and I'll walk alongside you, and I'll be praying for your success. So yeah, we need more Christian content creators, man. Just doing things for the Lord.
Sweet. All right, man. Well, thank you again for coming on and taking time out of your day to have this conversation.
I appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you later.
God bless.